This is a different qualification
Hello,
than
and welcome back to
so
coverage here at GP Richmond. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Reed Duke. And it's time for the quarterfinals here on Sunday Night Magic. We've got Noah Walker versus Joe Lissette. Death Shadow versus Stoneblade. Reed, matchup-wise, Noah's definitely the aggressor here, right?
Noah is definitely the aggressor. His cards cost less mana. He has fewer ways to generate 2-for-1 advantage. But so what that dynamic means basically is that Joe is going to have the advantage the longer the game goes, but Noah is going to have more effective early turns. And you can already see this with this opening sequence where Noah puts a 1-mana spell onto the stack, and Joe Lissette has to spend 2 of his best cards to stop it. This indicates to me that Joe kept a 1-land hand on the draw that was very reliant on that brainstorm.
Okay. He does get to resolve it now, however. But boy, that is a stiff price to pay before you even get to play a card. You get 2-for-1 right off the bat.
Yeah, the good news, the saving grace for Joe Lissette and for that play that he made on turn 1 is that the Death Shadow deck is not centered around any key card, and indeed it doesn't really have any cards that cost more than 2 mana, so there's not anything that you're saving the Force of Will for. In fact, you might as well cash it in early for a tempo advantage, protect your key cards, and make sure you start off the game on the right foot. That's almost the best use of Force of Will in this matchup.
Ponder now for Noah. And he's considering his options with the 3 cards on top. Of course, one of the key moments of any of these games is going to be if and when Noah Walker gets a threat on the battlefield. Bloodstained Mire's going to hit the bin.
The card to really keep an eye on in this matchup is the namesake of Joe Lissette's deck, Stoneforge Mystic. That's one that traditionally really excels in creature mirrors and fair matchups. It's a card that can give the slightly bigger deck a noticeable advantage, and there it is.
Boom! Stoneforge Mystic right on cue for you, Reed Duke.
The strength of this card is if it goes unanswered, Joe Lissette can search for Batterskull, put it directly into play via the 2-mana activation of Stoneforge Mystic, and have a 4/4 lifelink, effectively for free. Doesn't cost him a card, comes at a low mana cost early in the game.
Oof.
But
resolved.
Yeah, even if Noah Walker has an answer like a Fatal Push in his hand, Joe just gets a clean 2-for-1 advantage. He could find something like Umezawa's Chite, which is going to come in handy on turn 6 or 7 of the game. So any way you look at it, this is just a card that Joe is pretty happy to draw, and it demands an answer from Noah Walker.
In the meantime, Noah cycled a Street Wraith to try to find an answer for the Stoneforge. Did not find it. It resolved. Batterskull was the find. He passed a turn back, though, to Noah. And Noah transformed his Delver of Secrets using a revealed Reanimate. And he's going to cast that right now to get Street Wraith on the battlefield as well. So a big turn there from Walker.
Yeah, I love that sequence from this Death Shadow deck. Super cool innovation and technology to be built into the deck of cycling Street Wraith and then reanimating it. I mean, for starters, you get a 3/4 Swamp Walk for 1 mana that can't be Fatal Pushed. That's really good, but also it's a way to just plummet your life total if you want to cast a Death Shadow on turn 3 or something like that. I mean, you can see that Noah's already at 8 life, and Death Shadow is going to be effectively a lethal threat.
It's going to force Joe to use a Swords to Plowshares. He's going to target the Insectal Aberration. As Joe lost his Stoneforge Mystic to a Fatal Push that same turn. Oh, double trouble, 2 Swords to Plowshares?
Yeah, so from a rocky start, Joe's hand has developed really nicely. You see he's got a couple of basic lands under him. He finds 2 copies of his absolute best card in the matchup, Swords to Plowshares. And now with the efficiency of that double Swords turn, he is getting to the mid-game on even footing, which is exactly what he wanted from the start.
Yeah, I'm curious if this Ponder can find a card like Death Shadow, although now that I say that, 2 Swords to Plowshares just resolved. Noah's at 14 life again, Reed. Death Shadow doesn't look so hot anymore, does it?
Undid all of his hard work.
Wow. Swords doing great work for Joe Lisette. Though Noah did find another threat. He found a Delver of Secrets that he put back. Excuse me, that he put into play here.
But I'll tell you, it's going to be tough for Noah from this position. Joe's life total is nice and high, so Noah can't really leverage tempo anymore. And now we're at the situation where, I mean, Joe can cast his Batter Skull in a few turns, and his 4 copies of Snapcaster Mage all represent super effective, 2-for-1 card advantage, in addition to the flexibility of being able to choose a Brainstorm when he needs it, a Swords to Plowshares when he needs it.
Boy, the hits just keep coming here from Walker. Lisette had the option to flashback Swords to Plowshares with his Snapcaster Mage, but he said, you know what, I just want to get a Brainstorm going here. Noah Walker said, no, sir. Cast Daze, returning that land to his hand, and then transformed his Delver of Secrets as well, revealing, was it a Snuff Out that I saw? Perhaps.
Yeah, there have been a couple plays that Joe made so far in this game that indicate to me he's really, really prioritizing getting his mana underneath him. For example, Force of Willing the Thoughtseize on turn 1 to protect his Brainstorm. Using Brainstorm there instead of Swords to Plowshares. I think he's worried, okay, if my Tundra gets wastelanded and the top of my library doesn't deliver, I might get stuck without that option later. So let me prioritize getting my land drops, using my cantrips when I can, and then everything else will fall into place from there.
In the meantime, it's land go for Lisette. Noah Walker did have Snuff Out, so he's going to pay the 4 life, which is going to pump up his Death Shadow even further. It was just a 1/1. Another Snapcaster, perhaps? Yes, that's exactly what Joe has. But Force of Will from Noah Walker is threatening to keep the life totals very low here for Joe. This is a big attack.
Yeah, it's 9 points of damage.
Down to 4 goes Lisette, and he's going to need to find something real big and really quickly. No, he doesn't have it. He's going to pack it in, and Noah Walker,
wow,
with
amazing.
a relentless assault, picks up game number 1 in short order.
I thought the wind was blowing in Joe Lisette's direction there for a couple turns there, but the Death Shadow plus the Snuff Out just represents such a tremendous amount of power and toughness out of nowhere. Taking out the chump blocker, Force of Willing the second Snapcaster Mage, Noah Walker walking the tightrope, running on thin margins there, but able to put every piece in place exactly where it needed to be, and he stole that game away from Lisette, who should have had the advantage getting there to turn 4 and 5 at a high life total.
So great job by Noah there. And now we get to transition into sideboarded games. Traditionally speaking, I would assume that Joe Lisette has better sideboard options than Noah. Is that even the case here? I mean, Legacy is kind of weird.
Yeah. With Joe's deck being kind of a mid-range, well-balanced deck that has both creatures and planeswalkers and long game potential, there's not anything obvious that Noah can turn to in his sideboard that's going to make a dramatic improvement. He wants to stay balanced. He wants to have his mana denial and a couple well-placed removal spells and keep all his threats in. So he's not going to do any dramatic overhauls. Joe, on the other hand, has a lot of options at his disposal, and I am not 100% sure which ones he's going to turn to. Just going down the line here, back to basics is appealing because Noah Walker doesn't have any basic lands. However, it's a little bit off plan if your goal is to devote your resources to surviving the early rush and you feel advantaged in the mid game anyway. You might not want to turn to a sort of clunky 3-mana card like that. Joe can turn to other big stuff like Nahiri the Lithomancer if he wants more late game power, or Supreme Verdict. I would guess that one's coming in for sure, particularly the uncounterable nature of that. Super effective against a Delver or blue-based creature deck. Then True Name Nemesis and Vendilion Click, just to round out the mid-range options. I would say True Name Nemesis probably pretty effective as it matches up well against Death Shadow and Gurmag Angler simply as a blocker. So I think we'll see at least a handful of changes on Joe's side and unclear on Noah Walker's side.
Got a match, well, I should say game update from one of our back tables as well. Lucien Langeais playing lands against Ethan Weber with Eldrazi stomping. Lucien wins game 1 with his lands deck.
Okay, we might imagine that being off a quick Merit Lage token, which the Eldrazi deck is going to have no real answers for in game 1.
Mm-hmm.
I played against Lucien in this tournament. He impressed me with his play, his knowledge of his deck, and just his general demeanor. He was taking a consistent amount of time on all of his decisions, his mulligan decisions. He wasn't very emotive. I couldn't get a read on him. I think just a player who came, well prepared and played pretty seriously and tightly, and it's paid off in him now being up a game in the quarterfinals.
You actually had to face down a few Merit Lage tokens over the course of the day, didn't you?
Yeah, back-to-back lands opponents, which that was sort of a stumbling block in my tournament, as that's not my favorite matchup to play with Grixis Control.
Yeah. You did manage to go 1-1 in that matchup, though, right?
Yeah.
Nice work. Because
yeah.
I covered the first one, and I was like, wow, this looks really rough. And then BDM and Eduardo covered you on the other, and somebody came up to me. I came back from going outside for a minute, and they said, read one. I'm like, good for him.
I failed to put up much of a fight the first time when I played against Lucien, but the second time around, I was able to win the 2 sideboarded games off the back of surgical extraction.
You also faced Merit Lage from Matt Nass, did you not?
I did.
So, boy, you've seen enough of that token for one day. Nothing like a 2020 flying indestructible.
Yeah, the number of Merit Lages in Legacy is sort of inversely proportional to the number of Swords to Plowshares. It was a really, really popular strategy when Deathrite Shaman was legal, because you would see a lot of Sultai color decks and Grixis color decks, and the red and black removal just, of course, can't kill a 2020 indestructible. But that era is over, and now when we see more blue-white decks like the one Joe Lassette is playing, that 1 mana super efficient answer to Merit Lage just makes it a little tougher for that to be your central game plan. But the lands deck, thankfully, is extremely multi-dimensional, can win the game in a lot of different ways. It can even lock the opponent and then win with the Merit Lage at its convenience later, once all the opponent's lands are wastelanded and ghost quartered.
We also saw that they have the Punishing Fire plan. A little slow, but it can get the job done. And then even out of the sideboard, we saw Molten Vortex, which is another way to kill your opponent, even if they happen to have a Swords to Plowshares or something like that.
Yeah, believe it or not, lands was actually a solid existing deck before Dark Depths was ever printed, and it used to just win those glacially slow routes, like Punishing Fire, cast 24 times or something to kill the opponent, or attack with a single Creeping Tar Pit or whatever creature land of choice. But now Merit Lage allows the deck to finish in time and score some free wins, improve its matchup against faster combo decks.
Looks like our players are just about ready to go. Maybe one of the sleeves got busted there, I didn't see. Yeah, it does look like it. And we'll see if it's going to be Noah Walker.
Noah Walker going a little bit off-brand with this blue-black Death Shadow deck. He is famous for Grixis Delver. He had more than 1 Grand Prix top 8 with Grixis Delver in Legacy in the Deathrite Shaman era. I know he was playing it a bit, trying to revamp things after Deathrite got banned, but it looked like for this tournament in particular, he decided to just switch entirely, cut the red cards, play that super powerful Death Shadow. But Noah, no stranger to Delvers, Brainstorms, and Dazes.
Players in the 4:15 history of draft. Your pairings for round 2 are going up.
And Noah's going to take a mulligan. We've had a bit of a shuffle cam here in between games, but Guys are also kind of enjoying their time in the top 8 and having a chat. These two know each other quite well. All right, let's see if Noah can keep a 6-card opener here and get underway into our game number 2. How's it look, Noah? Good enough? Good enough, he says. Card goes back on top of the library, and we should see Joe. Sorry, back on the bottom of the library, he decided. Joe kicks things off now with the Ponder.
Joe got to be pleased with his start. Those 3 cards he's looking at with the Ponder are 3 of the cards that I would name as the absolute best ones in the matchup. That is Swords to Plowshares, Arid Mesa, and Basic Plains. First thing I want to see in my opening hand is lands to cast my spells.
Yeah.
Second thing is a nice answer to that first Delver of Secrets or Death Shadow, so that doesn't run away with things. From there, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of cards with the cantrips in these decks, and you can kind of sort it out based on what your opponent's doing.
Standard main event judges to the blue main event stage. Standard main event judges to the blue main event stage.
And here's the Thoughtseize for Walker. And it looks like it's going to resolve, so let's take a look at what Joe Lissette's working with here. Looks like it's Brainstorm, Stoneforge Mystic, and a pair of Snapcasters with the lands.
And one thing to highlight here is that Joe wisely did not draw the Swords to Plowshares, despite that being the card that he was potentially most excited about. He left it on top of his library because he knows it's safer there from a potential Thoughtseize.
Yeah, great point, Reed, and shows you the subtlety that you need to be great at Legacy. Joe certainly has it. But Noah Walker still gets to take away Stoneforge Mystic, and that's, of course, part of the key game plan here for Joe Lissette and one of his most powerful cards. It will be missed. Land go now from Joe. Another Street Wraith gets cycled away. Noah already down to 11. And he's going to have a Delver of Secrets. Curious how eager Joe is to use his Swords to Plowshares. Is it just any target, or does this thing actually have to transform to make it worthwhile?
No, I think Joe is happy enough trading 1 for 1, particularly because of those Snapcaster Mages in his hand.
Sure.
That means he's going to have a second shot at the Swords to Plowshares if Noah can deploy a creature. But looks like Noah not hitting his land drops after that mulligan.
These decks, generally speaking, need very little in the way of mana, but 1 is a little light. 2 mana is okay?
2 mana is okay, or at least you get to use your land drop in the form of something like a Wasteland or a Daze or something. You don't really need to have multiple lands in play, but you don't want to be, a land drop is a nice resource. You want to make it count.
Land go now from Lissette as he says, I agree with you, Reed. I'm going to use my land drop this turn.
Lissette knows his way around a land drop.
I think he's going to enjoy that. Well.
Gotta love those original printing or original art lands from Joe. Those are from Revised, signed by the artists. I'm sure he was excited to be at Grand Prix Richmond this weekend as we had Mark Poole, Douglas Schuler, Brian Wackwitz, all the big names from the early days of Magic art, all here in attendance. Get your card signed, your legacy staples.
You and I were walking around earlier today, and I got kind of distracted by one of their tables going, "Oh, that!" And you told me that happened to you too.
I know.
There's some good stuff over there. All right, so Noah does have a land drop and a Death Shadow. And by the way, you cannot tell me that I gotta like those white bordered lands. I like the signature. I like that they're old. He couldn't have gone a year older.
Sometimes people tell me that they choose white bordered basics strategically because they're very quick and easy to find when you're fetching your deck. I used to do that when I played with Land Tax, which is a card that lets you search for up to 3 basic lands during your upkeep. But even with something like a fetch land, it's nice. Boom, it stands out. Grab my island.
I don't know if I'm buying that read. You can just look at the artwork, too. I mean, it says right at the top of the card which one it is if you ever get confused and can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well look sweet. I actually have a hunch that Joe Lissette has a personal connection to these lands, or a nostalgic connection to them.
Okay.
Thoughtseize now from Walker.
This is going to
go ahead.
Maybe force the action. We did see Joe had 2 Snapcaster Mages, I believe. So I suppose he could just let Thoughtseize resolve and count on the other. But this is the turn where something's finally going to happen. Joe content to just make land drops and do nothing for as long as Noah wasn't pressuring his life total. But this might force him to do something rather than take a big hit from the Death Shadow.
Look at this hand from Joe. Double Snapcaster still, but the Vendilion Click and Ponder in there as well.
And boy, Noah's got to be careful. All those flash creatures with only 7 points of life.
Seriously.
I'm not sure if I think we are already adjusted for the Thoughtseize life, so I think 7 is going to be accurate once this finishes resolving.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But yeah, I mean, Vendilion Click, 2 hits and your Force of Wills are turned off. You can't fetch anymore. So it's a delicate balance, and you better believe that Joe is going to make things as hard on Noah Walker as possible. He won't attack unless he thinks it can benefit him, but if Noah looks like he's slipping up a little bit, Joe might back him into a corner by using Vendilion Click or Snapcaster Mage to chip off a few more points.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what Joe does here. I mean, he does have the option to just flash back a Swords to Plowshares with his Snapcaster Mage and kind of clean up the mess. But he also could take some different lines. He has a Brainstorm in his graveyard as well, and maybe he wants to start attacking or something. I mean, he's going to chump block, it looks like.
Well, the Snapcaster Mage has definitely blocked. Damage has not resolved yet.
Okay. So Joe wanting to make sure that he got that block in there in case this happened. That was stubborn denial from Noah Walker. But this still means that Joe takes no damage this turn.
And super effective play from Noah, because letting the Snapcaster resolve and then countering the Swords to Plowshares means that it's exiled permanently. So if Joe can't find another plow, then his second Snapcaster Mage is going to be reduced in effectiveness. His options are going to be limited.
Interesting. So it wasn't the Snapcaster that Noah's worried about. It was the fact that it could flashback specifically Swords to Plowshares, and he valued that higher. Really good stuff. And Joe Lissette still under assault here from this Death Shadow. 6-6 right now.
So something to point out, Marshall, we had talked about Noah missing land drops early in the game. We've talked a lot about how Joe wants to get his mana underneath him and get to the mid-game, make his land drops. But now we're sort of seeing the other side of that, which is Joe's made some great plays. He's filtered his draws. He resolved the Snapcaster Mage. He also didn't take a mulligan and was on the when Noah did. But now the dust has settled, and the fact that Joe has played 5 lands and Noah has only played 2 means Noah's had a lot more spells to work with. And that's really the driving force behind these Delver decks. They play super efficient spells, often only costing 1 mana, and they generate virtual card advantage by the fact that they don't have to put a lot of lands into play. They can use their Brainstorms and Ponders to shuffle away the extras.
Snapcaster Mage now from Joe. Flashes back Ponder. Is he just digging for another Swords to Plowshares?
That would be the best thing he could find. I'm sure there are other things he would settle for. Pretty much any action. A Stoneforge Mystic could make some interesting things happen. A Jace the Mind Sculptor could bounce the Death Shadow and manage it that way. He's got Supreme Verdict that he could have brought in off his sideboard.
Ooh, here's Street Wraith. Down to 5 for Walker. Down to 4.
Uh-oh, if this is a 3-mana spell, there are some good ones to choose from. Liliana the Last
That's a
Hope.
nice one. That'll get the Snapcaster Mage right out of the way.
For free, and put a Planeswalker onto the battlefield that Joe is going to have a very specific answer for. That is the big card that comes in off of Noah Walker's sideboard in a slow matchup like this. It's a hard-to-deal-with threat, generates value. You'd be surprised at how many of Joe's utility creatures happen to have 1 toughness. Liliana the Last Hope, just surprisingly major player in Legacy.
Card has been doing serious work all weekend. We've seen Council's Judgment be the common foil to it, but here's Stoneforge Mystic now from Lisette.
So
Batter Skull, but he still has to block here.
If Joe is forced to chump block the Death Shadow and can't make any other plays this turn, I think he's in big trouble. But if he can answer the Death Shadow in a different way and untap with the Stoneforge Mystic, keep in mind it does survive Liliana's +1 activation, then Batterskull could get him back into this game. It's a big, resilient threat, stabilizes his life total, pressures the Liliana. So it looks to me like Joe played Stoneforge Mystic first, followed by
shuffle?
Brainstorm. Maybe because he wanted the shuffle, I sort of lost track of if he was managing the top of his library, to be honest with you. But another thing that he can do is he can search for the Batterskull and then Brainstorm it back, shuffle it away with a fetch land, and that's a play that he might very likely make if he is planning on chump blocking with the Stoneforge Mystic.
He does have enough mana to hardcast Batterskull, but boy, that puts him in an awkward lock where he has to chump block. And this Liliana is starting to apply kind of passive pressure as well, ticking upwards towards a potential ultimate. Andrew Cuneo up a game over Alexander Chen on our back table. On our back table, and Lucien Longuet now tied up with Ethan Weber at 1 apiece.
This is a potentially lethal spell on the stack here. On the board, Joe does need to block the 9/9 Death Shadow or he's done.
So Diabolic Edict threatening Lisette's tournament. He's thinking. Got to figure he has something.
I think he has a Flusterstorm, which is not going to be good enough against the 2 untapped mana.
Yeah, that's going to do it. Noah Walker dispatches of Joe Lisette, even shows him to daze at the end there. And that's going to do it for our quarterfinal here on our live table. Noah Walker, 2-0, and he's going to be into the semis. Noah is going to play the winner, by the way, of the match that I gave you a couple of updates on, the Lucien Longuet versus Ethan Weber match. That's the Lands versus Eldrazi Stompy. So Noah will be facing the winner of that one. They're tied at a game apiece over there.
I'm sure Noah would rather play against the Eldrazi deck. That's a matchup where the actual card Death Shadow is just going to shine so brightly, being bigger than all the ground creatures of the Eldrazi deck, and really just creating a brick wall that they're going to have a tough time fighting through.
A little bit of decompression from these two, but the truth is that the tone of their conversation has been the same from before the game started all the way through the game over. These guys are so comfortable with each other and comfortable with the format. You can tell they're just
talking shop.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. All right, well, we're going to jump in on Brad Bonin and Kyle Miller, though. As I say that, just a cell phone there for Brad. No Brad at the moment, so we'll see if he pops back up.
Well, looks like we have some results here.
Oh, looks like it. Andrew Cuneo, he was up a game the last time we checked in with him over Alexander Chen. And Andrew has advanced.
Hooray. Am I allowed to say that?
Sure.
Hooray.
I was saying it for you all weekend. So great job, Andrew. And then that means that the last one we have going here is the one that we've jumped in on. But again, it looks like Brad had stepped away from the table, at least momentarily.
And that is Lucien, the Lands player, advancing. So Noah Walker with a relatively tough matchup on his hands here. Keep in mind the super efficient clock of the Delver deck backed up by Wasteland. You can steal some games. You Wasteland the Maze of Ith, get through one hit with the Death Shadow. Anything can happen, but I think it's probably not the matchup Noah was really crossing his fingers and hoping to play.
All right, looks like Brad's back. And we're going to get a game 3 to finish that our quarterfinal, see who takes that last seat in the semis. Of course, significant pay jumps and also pro point jumps for the professional players out here.
So we talked about this being a really close matchup. Marshall, I played it 4 times over the course of the weekend and had to fight hard for every single win that I got, and I didn't always get them. But I would say the relative advantage is probably to Miracles in the first game, where those permanent-based card advantage cards like Counterbalance and Jace the Mind Sculptor and Back to Basics, they're just really hard to answer for Grixis control. But after the Red Elemental Blast coming off the sideboard, I think the relative advantage is for Grixis. So a matchup that may have began 50-50 is a little bit better than that for Kyle Miller in this third game. At least that's my take on the situation.
Okay. Brainstorm now for Miller.
If you hadn't had enough of those white-bordered islands, Marshall, I think it's even the same picture.
It is. It's my favorite picture
Yeah.
for Island, so I got that going for me. Well, those white border ones have a certain charm to them, I have to admit.
I like them.
Yeah. Do prefer the darker black bordered ones. The thing about the black bordered ones of those is that the ink on the actual island is also darker. The whole card just has more.
Well, my take on it
feel.
is, when I started playing in the 90s, it was like you wanted the black border because you wanted to have the original versions of the cards, and the white border were like they were not as rare and they were newer and stuff like that, so it was kind of looked down on. But now in 2018, like the white border is the retro, so that's kind of cool in a way, and I don't mind it at all.
They're way more rare. You're totally right. That's funny. That's how that cycle goes, isn't it? By the way, players are posturing here still. Brainstorm, preordains being resolved. No real action yet, although here's a first strike. Thoughtseize from Kyle. Brad has a full grip of 7 cards. He may just say, sure, take a look at them. What's the worst you could do? Yeah, that's what he's going to do. All right, hand is Counterspell, double Flusterstorm, Monastery Mentor, Swords to Plowshares, Predict, and Counterbalance. That is a hand right there. No lands left, 7 spells, Reed.
Yeah,
Boy.
so we could be settling in for a long game here. If I'm Kyle Miller, I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of permission to fight through. I'm going to have to settle into some kind of, holding pattern where maybe I can make more land drops than Brad, or pick my spots, or make him tap out on a key turn. So I'm interested in taking something like Predict and just sticking Brad, saying, okay, if you want to keep your mana open every single turn for the rest of the game, you can do that, and I'll find other ways to develop. But I don't think taking like a Counterspell or one of the Flusterstorms is going to be that effective unless he has some kind of specific plan in mind, like I'm going to play Jace, which can't be hit by a Flusterstorm. So it does depend on the context of Kyle Miller's hand and, more importantly, the plan that he wants to construct for the rest of the game. And actually, it does look to me like Kyle's packing a couple of Planeswalkers there, so he could take Counterspell and just play Liliana and Jace on back-to-back turns and say, whatever, Flusterstorms are not countering the most important cards.
I remember when we were watching you play against Brad, you complimented him on his collection of cards.
Yeah, look at that.
Goodness.
All foil, everything.
He is not messing around with this deck. It is gorgeous. He's got some really cool and rarely seen versions of cards. Like, that's Counterspell right there, the one on top of his graveyard, which, by the way, is what Kyle ended up taking, interestingly. But, yeah, the Swords to Plowshares he has, it's a Judge promo. You don't see those very often. Predict Target Me from Brad.
So I'm going to guess that Brad had top with the Preordain and knew about that Snapcaster Mage there.
Looks like it. But does this mean that Liliana the Veil's resolving? It sure does. Funny, after having watched Legacy for the last 2 days, this is the first Liliana the Veil that I've seen on the battlefield, but I've seen Lost Hope like 15 times.
Look at that, Marshall. Kyle resolved the Liliana and didn't even plus.
Whoa! Left her on 3.
And here
he must really love his hand here, huh?
This is pretty interesting. We're going to see Monastery Mentor and make a token from Brad. But it's not going to work out well for him unless he finds Force of Will, because Kyle Miller can play Jace, bounce the token, Edict the Monastery Mentor, and then it's going to be 2 Planeswalkers against nothing.
Well, he did keep it. I did not see a Force of Will in there.
It feels to me like Brad may have jumped the gun there. He might have gone turn too early with this Monastery Mentor plan.
It resolves. This is a disaster for Brad. And look at this. The 1-2 punch of Planeswalkers, and Brad doesn't have anything to do with it. All right, now he's got Gideon, ally of Zendikar here. How does that change the math?
Changes it quite a bit.
Well, actually, hold the phone. He might just get it countered anyway.
But remember that Brad has those Flusterstorms,
right,
so
right.
he's covered. Gideon matches up well against both Liliana and Jace. And I don't know exactly how Kyle is gonna manage it. He might want to focus on getting some creatures of his own onto the battlefield. Baleful Strix would be a good start. He could bounce the token if he would like.
That forces Brad to activate Gideon at some point. One card that we saw you... Oh, and look at this. Pithing Needle. We're in Game 3 here for Kyle. We saw Diabolic Edict do good work for you over the course of the tournament as well. Mm-hmm. Another potential answer if Brad were to leave Gideon all by his lonesome. But in the meantime, Kyle Miller, it looks like he's not to be stopped here in the quarterfinals.
The story of this game for me is
that's Spell Pierce, by the way.
Kyle got to see Brad's hand with the Thoughtseize, saw the double Flusterstorm, and then has planned his game around cards that cannot be Flusterstormed. You even saw, we talked about his ability to Force of Will the Gideon. Didn't do it because he didn't want to trade off with the Flusterstorm. There, Brad's able to get half of a Snapcaster Mage. That's fine, but still has these 2 Planeswalkers to contend with.
Counterbalance looks woefully behind the bar here. Boy, with Kyle Miller firmly in the lead on board, that counterbalance doesn't seem to be doing much at all. And look at this. He's going to start plussing right now. I want to see what you're working with. And he says, you don't get that one. He's got another copy of Jace the Mind Sculptor. And it looks like Kyle's going to play it safe, start attacking Gideon with Snapcaster Mage. Even though Gideon's under Pithy Needle, doesn't necessarily need to stay that way forever.
One of the most fascinating things about this game is the way Kyle has not been activating his Liliana.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
It makes sense because his hand is pretty strong. He's holding cards that he likes, and Brad Bonin is very, very firmly ahead in cards in hand. We saw him resolve that Predict for a 2-for-1. He just hasn't deployed as many permanents. So, yeah, on a basic level, if I have 2 cards, my opponent has 6, I don't want us each to discard. But the loyalty does matter, and just pressing an advantage a little bit when you're ahead on the battlefield. It's tempting. I'm not sure exactly how I would be playing it in Kyle's seat, but I'm eager to continue watching and see what his plan is and how it unfolds.
Yeah, I think Kyle's really valuing holding up that Force of Will just in case anything were to knock off this advantage that he's got. But, man, you just start plussing Liliana every turn, and you've got Jace the Mind Sculptor on your side, and that teeter-totters pretty favorably back in your direction.
Yeah, especially with the counterbalance, I might just say, I'm not casting any spells for the rest of the game. Deal with these Planeswalkers.
Yeah.
I'm going to knock cards out of your hand.
And sure, the first couple are cards that Brad maybe wasn't able to leverage in a big way, the Fluster Storms or something, but eventually, Lily going to get you. Brad passes the turn back with really no relevant permanents at the moment. The counterbalance not doing a whole lot. Gideon stuck under Pithy Needle. And Kyle looks like he's content to keep ticking Jace the Mind Sculptor up, perhaps? Maybe he's hesitating here. Snapcaster Mage from Brad.
7 p.m. standard players.
Kyle wants to see what the options are. That is, I mentioned it quickly, the card that countered the Thoughtseize
7 p.m. standard players.
is the Spell Pierce. So what are we looking
So
at?
he does still have 2 Fluster Storms available? Is that what we believe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good eye there. I had missed that.
Kyle really taking his time here to figure out what the Snapcaster Mage should resolve or not. And he's going to go for the Force of Will, exiling a Brainstorm.
I like it.
He's got 5 mana available. Storm count's only 2 right now.
Make this trade, then start plussing the Liliana, and soon enough your opponent won't have enough cards to manage everything that you have on the battlefield. Brainstorm also not doing much against an active counterbalance.
And this was in response to Jace. It did work, though. Snapcaster Mage got countered, and Jace's ability resolved. Gurmag Angler. And this is basically Kyle just emptying out his hand at this point, right? Like he's given up on having that Jace be relevant, and he's just going to start plussing Liliana. Wouldn't be surprised. He's going to finish off Gideon. Again, just playing it extra safe. Well, no, I was wrong. He's going to pass the turn back, Reed.
Yeah, I want to see him start plussing the Liliana because the loyalty is really valuable. I know you want to hang on to the Jace in your hand as a backup, but once your hand's empty, you get to work on the opponent on all the future turns. And, you know, so at a certain point, you just got to rip the Band-Aid off, get rid of your last card, and then Liliana goes haywire.
In the meantime, Brad Bonin is going to try to use this extra time that he's gotten. And we see Monastery Mentor, Snapcaster Mage, flashing back Ponder, creating a Monk. Yowza.
And Brad is right back in this game.
He really is.
Particularly because of the counterbalance, which if things line up for him, if he's able to navigate carefully enough, he can stop Kyle Miller from casting more spells. And if he's just able to manage the permanents on the battlefield, that means he can win in the long run.
Again, not having a lot of loyalty on Liliana could come back to bite Kyle here as well, as he would normally have access to lines like we saw him take earlier where you bounce a creature and then minus Liliana.
Sure, or imagine Brad had fewer cards in hand. You could bounce the Monastery Mentor and knock it out of the hand with the Liliana. The game would be very different, I think, if the Liliana had been being plus. Granted, let's not forget Kyle kept some really good cards in his hand that he's put to good use already, so we can't just recreate the exact same game state with Liliana on 3 counters because Kyle would have had to make some sacrifices.
That's right. Yeah, that Force of Will notably was one that he was able to keep because he was not plussing Liliana. Oh boy. True Name Nemesis. Is this out of the sideboard for Kyle? Or does he main deck this card?
Looks like it is one of in the sideboard.
Okay. Cool. Pyroblast, but Brad had left Swords to Plowshares on top of his library, and that gets countered. So Monastery Mentor kind of going off now.
Yeah, and masterfully navigated by Brad. He sets up the counterfight with a 1 on top to beat the Pyroblast. Again, a play that Kyle could have made impossible by plussing the Liliana because Brad needed both cards to be able to Force of Will there.
Well, Kyle is still clinging to that copy of Jace the Mind Sculptor in his hand. But in the meantime, he has fallen a bit behind on board, hasn't he?
Yeah, the Jace is just not that good against a Monastery Mentor.
What is even good against a Monastery Mentor? 3 monks and a Snapcaster Mage out of his deck.
Depends if he brought in his Toxic Deluge.
Okay. Yeah, that does seem good.
I mean, maybe it just starts with a Lightning Bolt on the Mentor or a Kolaghan's Command, something like that.
Man, Kyle kind of spun the wheel here. He decided to cast Baleful Strix to see if he could hit a land, which he did. That'll allow him to cast his other copy of Jace.
Okay, so he can go use Jace to bounce bounce Mentor, and then plus Liliana. He'll wind up losing his Jace probably if he makes that play. What did you catch? What card was revealed to counterbalance?
It was Swords to Plowshares.
Okay. Was it another Swords to Plowshares, or though I know the previous turn was Swords to Plowshares, it got cast on Kerbegging.
Brainstorm then.
Okay, so a different one, but that's one that's going to continue generating more monk tokens. So I think Kyle might just have to make that play of getting rid of the Monastery Mentor. Looks like he's going to plus and then Brainstorm instead. Or plus and then Fate Seal. Fate Sealing the Brainstorm to the bottom is a reasonable play. But on this really tenuous board state, he really needs Brad Bonin to not have a good draw. Oh.
Here's that Brainstorm off the top of the library.
Yeah. Brad wins. He's going to play Jace, and the combination of Jace fueling Monastery Mentor is going to be too much.
That is insane. Brad Bonin defeats Jace, Liliana, and Kyle Miller and advances to the semifinals there with miracles. Oh, boy. So I just noticed, looking at our bracket here, Reed, that both of our Miracles players have advanced. They are going to be playing each other. So that's Brad Bonin and Andrew Cuneo.
And that's our
Buckle
off
in
round.
for that
so
one.
you want to go see a movie or something? We'll be back in 3 hours.
I was going to say, man, an untimed, Miracles mirror. We could probably go watch a couple of movies. On the other side, it's going to be Noah Walker and and Lucien Lange, with lands for Lucien, and on the other side, Noah Walker's on Death Shadow. Welcome back to the booth. Marshall Cyclic with Reduke. Thanks so much for coming along with us for Sunday Night Magic here from Richmond. That was fun. That matchup got pretty complex down the stretch, and Planeswalker activations, when to do them, when to not, when to hold back, when to say, okay, now's the time I'm going to start going on this game plan. Very tricky business in every format, and Legacy's no exception to that. Again, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we're going to have BDM and Eduardo in here, though, and it's either going to be Brad and Andrew playing in Miracle's Mirror, or we're going to see Noah versus Lucien Lands versus Death Shadow. So one of those is going to come up in the semifinals right after these messages.